All right, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order, even though we're a few minutes early, unless anybody objects. And Mr. Tony, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
Commissioner Cannell? Here. Commissioner Hamilton?
Here.
Commissioner Herbert?
Here.
Commissioner Robinson?
Here.
Commissioner Thompson?
Here.
Commissioner Williams? Here. All are present. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Everybody should have received a copy of the minutes by email. Is there a motion to approve or any discussion? Second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? First action is Resolution 1287, authorizing and approving the transfer of certain surplus real property at the wastewater division located on Ebenezer Road.
Commissioners, you'll remember that last month Bill Elmore gave you a comprehensive review of the 10-mile pump station agreement that we have. Today I recognize Mark Rawhoff. He is our manager of water system engineering, and he is going to present the resolution to you for your approval.
Commissioners, today we're asking for your approval of a resolution that authorizes the transfer of certain surplus KUB property in the 10-mile basin to First Utility District. As Ms. Roach mentioned, Mr. Elmore last month presented information about the 10-mile basin and the fact that there are 3 service providers that currently supply that area: KUB, West Knox Utility District, and First Utility District. This slide shows the limits of the 10-mile drainage area and the 3 service providers: KUB in this area, West Knox in the green, and First Utility District here to the south. The existing wastewater facilities are represented by the dark green lines. Currently, wastewater flows through 3 existing KUB meters, through First Utility District trunk lines, to the KUB 10-mile pump station located here. The station then pumps flows through an existing force main back to KUB's gravity collection system, which ultimately goes to the Fourth Creek wastewater treatment plant. Upon approval of this resolution and signature by all 3 utilities of the new agreement and completion of the First Utility District pumping station, KUB will abandon the 10-mile pump station and we'll transfer the property to First Utility District. This slide shows the proposed future flow of these wastewater flows, where KUB's existing flows will travel down to the new First Utility District pump station, which is being constructed adjacent to the property we'll be transferring, and then those flows will be pumped to the First Utility District treatment plant. So that will be the future flow of wastewater once this transfer occurs. There are a number of advantages to KUB in abandoning our station. First of all, our flows to our Fourth Creek plant will be reduced. The costs and the problems associated with a large pumping station that has minimal flows coming to it today will be eliminated. We'll avoid anywhere from $4 to $5 million worth of capital construction costs that would be required. And then we leave ourselves the flexibility of future options should things change in the future. One additional item of note is the fact that this pump station property is located in the 10-mile creek flood zone. This blue area shows you the flood zone, and our property that we're discussing today is located here. Historically, this pump station property floods regularly during heavy rains and is often submerged. This property is of interest to First Utility since they are located adjacent to the property with their new pumping station, so it is of interest to them to have that property. This is a picture of the existing 10-mile pump station, which sits in a depressed area with a earthen berm that's been constructed around it and a concrete wall. And these were constructed to help reduce the flooding that takes place around the pump station. adjacent to the property that we're transferring is the First Utility District pump station property. Here you see it under construction today. This is the new wet well the First Utility District is constructing, and the pump station will be located here. The resolution authorizes the property to be transferred, and it consists of 2.31 acres of land. It's adjacent to the First Utility District pumping station and is located within a floodway. We will salvage the usable equipment from the station. The structures will be left as is. First Utility District will take responsibility for those structures, and any future demolition and disposal will be their responsibility. In summary, this resolution declares the 10-mile pump station to be no longer needed by KUB, and it is in the best interest of KUB and its customers to transfer this property to First Utility District, and this authorization provides the ability to transfer that property to First Utility District. Are there any questions?
What happens to the abandoned forced main that comes back towards the Wharf Creek? Just leave it abandoned?
We will leave it abandoned. If there's any future needs for that line, we'll have it still in place, but right now we don't know of any future needs. Any questions?
Anybody else? Thank you. Is there any public discussion about this issue? Is there a motion regarding this? That's all moved.
Second.
Mr. Cole?
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Cannell,
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton,
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert,
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson,
Aye.
Commissioner Thompson,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Resolution 1287 is approved.
Thank you. At this point, do we have a president's report?
Commissioners, I'll remind you that in October you authorized refunding of bonds in all 4 divisions, and I'll recognize Mark Walker to share with you the results of that sale.
Or they could read this instead, right?
Yeah, that'd be a pleasant change. Last week, Commissioners, we sold refunding bonds in all 4 systems for the purpose of refinancing outstanding debt at lower interest rates. Today, I want to go over the results of the sale with you. February 12th and 13th, Tuesday and Wednesday of last week, I believe, we sold a total of $144 million in refunding bonds. And again, that was the intent was to refinance debt that had previously been sold across all 4 systems back in 2005 and 2006. The bonds were sold on a competitive basis, and we'll see in a moment, we'll go through each of the series of bids, but a healthy response for all 4 issues. But the good news is the total debt service savings associated with the refinancing is $25 million over the life of the bonds, or $17 million on a net present value basis. That is better than we expected. When we first looked at this opportunity, we were projecting around $17 or $18 million in savings. So to come out with close to $25 million, we're very pleased with that. Commissioners, this chart reflects some of the particulars of each of the sets of refunding bonds. A couple of things to point out to you. You may recall that wastewater at $113 million is by far the largest of the sets of refunding bonds. And what we're refunding was a bond issue that we did shortly after the consent decree was announced back in 2005. And as you well know, the capital program increased significantly at that time, and we had a very large bond issue at the outset to help fund those capital expenditures. So we're able to refund that, and then there was some other issues with gas, water, and electric that were done around the same time. With wastewater being the largest part of the refunding, naturally you would expect that it has the largest part of the debt service savings, and it does at almost $21 million. And then also you'll note that you can see that the average rate for the new bonds versus the average rate for the bonds that are being refunded. Just look at the significant difference of movement in, obviously, in interest rates over that period of time. And then finally, the issuance cost. These are the fees we pay to the various professional firms that facilitate the sale of the bonds. In total, $560,000. You see it broken down by system as well. At $560,000, compared to the bonds being issued, it was about 0.4%, which is consistent with past bond transactions that we have, and is very competitive across the industry. Any questions on that? Okay. The next series of slides, I'll try and go through quickly. This is more to be in compliance with our debt management policy, which requires that I review all of the bids that come in for each series of bonds and the final maturity schedule. But for the wastewater bonds, which again was by far the largest, we received a total of 9 bids from various financial institutions, investment companies. Again, very good to get that many bids. Usually you get the better rate, of course. The low-cost bid was Citigroup Global Markets, came in at 3.19%. Obviously, wastewater is going to have slightly higher rates than the others because this debt goes out longer. And obviously, the further you go on the yield curve, typically the rates will rise. The average bid was 3.3, and you can see the spread between the low and the high, about 37 basis points there. For the wastewater bonds, you see in the box on the left-hand side of the page, the total debt service. This is principal and interest that will be paid over the life of the new bonds, around $178 million. Compared to what we would have paid if we didn't do the refinancing, around $199 million. So you see the $21 million in total savings. That averages out to $860,000 per year. So pretty significant for the wastewater system. I'll also point out that, and you'll see this on all of the charts, the average life of the debt has been reduced slightly. The key point there is we didn't extend the life of the debt with the refunding. The state doesn't really let you do that anyway. These bonds will be callable in 2021, so it's about an 8-year call provision on these bonds. And that'll be the same on each series as well. For the gas bonds, 6 bids. Bank of America Merrill Lynch came in low at 2.65. The average bid, I think, was around 2.75, and the spread between low and high, around 20 basis points. For gas, $1.6 million in savings spread over the life of the bonds. That's about $100,000 per year for gas. For water, 7 bids. Again, Bank of America Merrill Lynch came in low at 2.7915. You will note that the range on the bids here is much tighter than in particular wastewater and even on gas. The difference between the low bid and the next lowest, less than 1 basis point, 2.7915 versus 2.796. So that's interesting. For the water bonds, the savings is $1.3 million over the life of the debt. That's about $75,000 per year. And for electric, 8 total bids. Again, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, the lowest. They actually were lowest on 3 of the 4 series of the bonds. And this was even tighter than the water bonds, coming in at 2.6404. William Blair and Company was next at 2.6416. And the difference between the low and the high, just around 7 or 8 basis points. So very compact, actually, on both the electric and the water bonds. And for the difference, $1.2 million in savings. That's about $65,000 to $70,000 per year over the life of the bonds. So really the story here is for the wastewater system and the significant savings. And just to close with the detail on the issuance cost, I mentioned earlier it's $560,000. This shows how that $560,000 will be paid out according to financial advisor, Cumberland Securities, Bond Counsel, Bass, Berry & Sims, rating agencies. Also, this is a new item as far as the accounting fee to Southern Newhouse, $12,000. Whenever you do a advance refunding and have an escrow, the IRS requires if you have a mathematical verification, and so this is the firm that's performing that. You may have not noticed that. Like I said, we haven't had that previously. So again, $560, very competitive in what we expected.
So the accounting fee, it's new, they just started that
obviously, with the savings, in particular for wastewater, if we go through the financial planning process, we'll plow that into our models and see what it shows.
What does that, a couple of questions I have, Mark. What does that do for the, on wastewater, for example? What is our overall debt cost right now?
Overall debt cost, this will take it down to probably right at 4% or maybe a little south of 4%. Going into this, it was 4.16. I actually haven't done the overall calculation, but it should be very close to that.
Are there more bonds this year that will be subject to being available to be refinanced?
Possibly. The oldest debt that we have right now is 2005. Each system did a refunding back in 2005. Those bonds aren't callable to 2017, actually. And I don't know if those were advance refunded before or not. So that's a possibility. We just need to work with Cumberland Securities on that. The next potential candidate would be some bonds that were sold in 2007 that we're looking at a potential refunding for that. So the answer to your question is maybe. Don't know right now.
So callable is not the date that you can refinance. What's the difference between when it's callable and when it's eligible to be refinanced? Or is there a difference?
There is a difference. For example, on these bonds right here that we talked about today, this $144 million, those bonds are not callable until 2015. So what you do, it's called an advance refund. When you set up an escrow account with an institution, the proceeds of these issues go into the escrow. They earn some interest over that period of time. And then 2 years from now, whenever the call date comes, you have enough to retire the debt, which is actually 2015 for these bonds. So you can do an advance refunding, but you only get one shot at that for each series of bonds. So you can refinance if the rates in your analysis shows that it's all right at basically, you don't have to wait till the call date. Unless you've done a previous advance refunding, then you do have to wait till the call date. So those bonds that I mentioned that might be refunding candidates back in 2005, if those had been advance refunded before, we'd have to wait till the call date for that. Did that answer your question?
Mostly.
Okay.
But, all right, I heard you say, you're going to plow this into our, we refinanced a whole lot in the last 5 years, feels like anyway. Are we at the point where, our debt ratios, it starts making a difference in what we can see in our debt ratios? And do we need to tell you to go, let's go borrow some more money because the rates are so good and our ratios look better? Or are you already doing that?
I think we're pretty close to doing that. We, as you know, we have target debt ratios for each of the systems, and we're very close or even slightly above on probably all of those. And that's one of the barometers that we use for all of our financial plans. Wastewater in particular, we're slightly over our target of 60%. I think over time we'll be able to bring that down. Refundings help that as we go further out over time. But I don't think we're at a point now where, I think we're borrowing at a very efficient level, and we're in line with our targets.
So maybe I should ask the question this way. If we wanted to be more aggressive with Century 2 and, replace more foam poles and more leaking galvanized pipes or whatever, and we said, boy, we need to borrow more money to do that, would you say that we're in a position to do that?
I think we're already in a good position where we are. I would say no. I think we're in a good position with our debt ratios and such. So if we wanted to increase significant spending, we have capacity to do that, but we would have to adjust our targets from where they are right now. So I think based upon our current debt issuance plan, our current capital plan, we're close to our target. So we'd have to work, with the board and say we want to raise from 45% to 50%, and then you could do that. We just would all have to be comfortable with raising those debt ratios targets.
And let me add something to that. Those targets are set in conjunction with our rating agencies. We build into those targets in our financial plan, financial flexibility. So I don't want you to think that we're at the max and if there was some sort of catastrophe, we have no financial capacity to borrow. We do, but it's because we have built in the targets more conservative than what are required. We would need to adjust the targets, but the targets are flexible in case that's needed. We wouldn't just want to do it for normal operations. We want to always maintain some financial flexibility.
Any other questions?